prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hybrid martyrs, Saint Thomas Aquinas, and the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so today we're going over chapter 3, part 4, the object of the intellect. All right, so before we begin with the lecture, I want to run you guys through what's called Avicenna's Flying Man Experiment. Avicenna was a Muslim philosopher / commentator on Aristotle. All right, this is the thought experiment that he came up with to kind of help explain, it really helps to explain the difference between an Aristotelian and a Platonist. So let's suppose, in theory, you have a man who from the first moment of existence is in empty space, flying out in empty space. He touches nothing, he sees nothing, he smells nothing, tastes nothing. All right. Would this man know anything? Michael.
Well, would he be able to know himself since he could touch his body?
He's suspended like this. He's not touching himself. He touches nothing.
I guess not. He can't observe anything.
You say no? Okay. Dominic?
Doesn't he still have his mind? So he could
Oh yeah, he has a mind. He's a full human nature, fully equipped. But just from the first moment of his existence, he's been flying suspended in space, not sensing anything. Does he know anything? Ella?
Could he know as much as any animal would? Like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty.
We have interior sensations. Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what would he know if he felt those?
The same as if any animal felt that.
Why does it have to be the same of an animal if he's feeling it, though, and he has a human nature?
I just don't know that he'd have the capacity to reason through anything since he doesn't have anything to think about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lisa?
Since his first, it's his first, existence, it's pre-red existence, he wouldn't know anything because he wouldn't have the senses to let him know that, because he can't see anything, so he doesn't know what's going on around him.
Mm-hmm.
He can't taste anything, so he doesn't know if any nutrition is there.
Okay. Let's say it's the first moment of his existence, okay? He's not hungry. He just kind of came fully energized into the world. Brayden?
Can I step outside for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
Does he know that he exists? Because if I'm asking you if he knows anything, that would be a type of knowledge.
Well, he said he can't see, right?
He can't see, no.
So I think he knows that consciousness, his conscience, exists, but I don't think he know his body exists.
So you think he would have a self-awareness, a self-conscious that would still be informing him? Spencer? Mm-hmm. All right, so here's what a Platonist would answer. A Platonist would say, yes, he still knows something. Okay? Because for the Platonists, the intellect and intellectual knowledge is separate from the senses. Okay, so there's still going to be some kind of knowledge. maybe some kind of interior awareness. An Aristotelian would say he would know absolutely nothing because the intellect is a blank slate, okay? And unless the agent intellect is presenting information from the senses to it, it's just in potency and it's knowing nothing. So an Aristotelian would say the flying man knows nothing. And it's like how one of the thought experiments Avicenna uses to kind of like drive home, this is what Aristotelian human nature looks like. Okay, it's in this weird thought experiment. This man would know nothing because he has nothing. He has no senses feeding his intellect. But a Platonist their instinct would be, oh yeah, you got to know at least something because there's something about you distinct from your body and connected to that knowledge. All right. So now we're going to go into intellectual knowledge. And sense knowledge. So I'm going to put up here 3 different philosophers. And these 3 different philosophers, they give a good wide taste, so to speak, of different ways you can understand the relationship between knowledge of the intellect and the knowledge of the senses. So the first guy is Democritus. Democritus is a pre-Socratic philosopher, so he's before Socrates and Plato, who kind of like set the more rigorous systematization of philosophy in place. And Democritus, I believe he's also the guy who kind of comes up with the idea of atoms. We talk about atoms in modern sciences, but the idea itself of something that is like the most reducible object that you can have in matter is called the atom. That's a Greek idea. From Greek philosophy. So Democritus thought that all intellectual knowledge was sense knowledge. It's the same thing. All right, and ultimately, when you press a lot of philosophies, this is kind of how materialism is going to explain knowledge. There's nothing really distinct between what you take in through your senses and what your intellect is able to apprehend. Yes, Mary Beth?
I don't know what
Sure. In contrast with Democritus was Plato. And Plato held that intellectual knowledge and sense knowledge were completely separate. All right, so Democritus holds that they're the same. Plato says they're completely unrelated, about as different as can be, not dependent on one another. And then the third philosopher we're going to present to you is Aristotle. He kind of takes the middle road approach between these two philosophies. And for Aristotle, intellectual knowledge is related to sense knowledge though distinct. All right, so Aristotle, like Democritus, will say that yes, the sense knowledge is what causes our intellectual knowledge, but there's a real, genuine difference between the two, similar to the genuine difference that Plato held between the two. But Plato's difference from Aristotle is that Plato would see them as being completely unrelated to one another. All right, any questions on the relationship between intellectual knowledge and sense knowledge? Does anyone remember how Aristotle explains the relationship between intellectual knowledge, the abstractions, and the sense knowledge. We studied it towards, I believe the end of December. It's the process of induction where you take in all of the different senses, okay, and then you form a phantasm. And in the phantasm is that rudimentary universal form that your agent intellect then abstracts, right? So that's the connection between the two. All right, next we're going to talk about the necessity of phantasms. All right, so just a real quick review. What's a phantasm?
Is it like a mirror image of what your senses perceive?
Yes, okay, the image within your imagination of what your senses have perceived. Very good. Now, are phantasms necessary for the intellect to understand concepts? Does the intellect need phantasms to understand knowledge or to understand concepts? Michael.
Well, if the intellect is taking in information from the senses, there needs to be those senses presented to it. So that would be in the form of a phantasm.
Okay, so the answer is yes. Very good. Phantasms are necessary for intellectual knowledge because that is what is presented to the intellect to be known. How about after abstraction's taken place, though? Well, does the intellect still need the phantasm to understand the essence of the thing? Where would you put your best guess down on this roulette table called a philosophy class? Black or reds? Lisa.
Yes, because through the senses you get phantasms, and then the intellect then takes those phantasms and understands and makes connections with phantasms.
Okay, yeah, and you understand I'm asking, like, after the fact, after abstraction has taken place, will the intellect still require phantasm to understand something?
Yes, because I can understand like my favorite soup bowl that's sitting in my cupboard. Like I can understand what it looks like and where it is. But I'm not with it. But I still know what it looks like.
Okay, and so you're saying intellectually, like the abstract form of soup bowl, okay, still requires your individual phantasm to be comprehended, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but you're right. So initially you might think like, okay, once the form's been abstracted, boom, the potential intellect knows the abstracted form, it's good to go. But that's not so. And here's the reason St. Thomas says, in order to understand the intellect must turn to phantasms. And here's why, and I think this explanation is very, very interesting. It is proper for an essence to exist in individuals. It's proper for an essence to exist in individuals, and that's why the intellect always needs the phantasm, the individuation of an essence, in order to fully comprehend it. So I'll ask you this question, and this will kind of clarify any potential confusion. What is more proper to an essence? To exist as an idea in the intellect? Or sorry, what is more proper for the essence of, say, a stone? Rockiness. The essence of a stone. Is it proper for that essence of a stone to exist in your intellect as an idea? Or is it proper for it to exist in an actual stone?
In the actual stone.
In the actual stone. Okay, so detached from the individual, there's something that's like inherently lacking in the essence because it's not, what's proper to it. And so for that reason, St. Thomas says you'll always need the phantasms in order for you to fully comprehend what is being perceived, because it's proper for rockiness to really be in this or that rock as opposed to just simply an idea. All right, which kind of spells a little bad sign for death, right? When you're separated from the body and you no longer have phantasm, it's much worse than you thought. Maybe you thought you could just kind of recollect essences afterwards with your immaterial soul. And it's like, yeah, I guess you can, but even that recollection of the essences, there's going to be something lacking because it's not even proper for those things to be thought of apart from some particular individual. All right, and so the phantasms are always required for the full comprehension. All right, and so it's for this reason an essence cannot be understood without reference to an individual. All right, next we're going to take a look at what happens to the intellect. So we've established that clearly, like, not only is the intellect dependent on the senses for acquiring knowledge, but it's also dependent on the senses, and I'm including the interior senses here when I say that, for understanding the knowledge that it does possess. But we're going to take a look at what happens to the intellect when the senses, exterior and interior included, are suspended, as Aquinas puts it. So the suspension of the senses, all right, that is to say they've stopped functioning or they cease to, do their work. When are your senses ever suspended? Death would be one. Okay, yeah, terminated. Suspension means you've stopped for a time, okay, and you can resume. Death would be more a termination because they ain't coming back.
When you're unconscious.
All right, when you're unconscious, okay, so you're asleep, maybe if you're like drugged up on something, okay, the senses are suspended. Yeah, it's like your cogitative power goes whack, all right, when people are drugged up or looped up on something. All right, so because the intellect is dependent on the senses, when senses are suspended, the intellect is hindered in making judgments. The intellect is hindered in making judgments. Refresher, what is a judgment? What I mean by that term in relation to the intellect?
Composing and dividing concepts.
Correct, yeah. So the latter is green. It's like if the senses are suspended, then your intellect will just start going haywire on whatever judgments it forms in that regard. And so because of that, no one is guilty of actions in dreams. All right, like maybe you have a dream where in that dream you actually did choose to do something bad. All right, but because there's this whole hindrance, your senses are suspended, and your intellect's kind of working through that weird state. There's nothing responsible to be held, right? And that's why you don't have to worry about anything in a dream. It's fair game. Okay, next we're going to talk about the order of knowledge. So the first one that we'll take a look at is individual knowledge of individuals, as opposed to knowledge of universals. This is kind of review for, I guess, half of you guys. What comes first? Knowledge of individuals or knowledge of universals? Yeah, for Aristotle and for St. Thomas, the knowledge of individuals is first. All right, it comes prior. Knowledge of the universals are formed once you have, amassed so much experience with individuals. So, for example, we understand this armadillo that has walked into the room currently. All right. Yeah, just kidding. Class wasn't that exciting. But let's say an armadillo walks in here. Anyone here ever seen an armadillo? That's kind of going for animal knowledge scene. Stick with it. You're going to understand an armadillo before you understand the universal concept of what is applicable to all armadillos. Okay. You understand this or that dog, in your childhood prior to understanding what is universal to all dogs. Okay, so in the order of knowledge of the individual comes first as opposed to the universal. Another way of organizing knowledge, it's kind of contrasting sense knowledge versus intellectual knowledge. But within the intellect itself, there is intellectual knowledge that is more general, contrasted with intellectual knowledge that is more particular. All right, and so as far as abstractions go, what do you think comes first? Knowledge that is more general, covers wider, broader definitions, or knowledge that is more particular, that's more specific in its understanding of classes of things? Ella? Yeah, the general is going to come first. Very good. So the general is prior. Do you just know that because they're in the same order as the previous one?
No.
What was your reasoning?
If I see a necklace, I first think it's a necklace, then I think it's green.
Then you'll think of green.
Of like what color it is or like what kind it is that I see. It's the thing first.
All right, so you're saying you perceive green later?
First you see the dog, then you see it's brown.
Well, you don't think it's the reverse? First you see some brown thing approaching, and then you're able to distinguish, oh, it's a dog.
Well, then you're not fully seeing it. Once you see the whole thing, like I see desk, I see the desk first. If I can't see it, then maybe I'll think it's something else. But
Okay, I'll put it to you this way. Are there more dogs or are there more brown things?
brown things.
Okay, what do you think you're able to comprehend as a concept first? Brown or dog?
Maybe brown, since there's more brown things.
Yeah, that's where I'm leading you to. Well, let's go back to the necklace. let's say before you even know what a necklace is, or before you understand, a necklace, you might see it as gold, right? But you can understand what gold is before you understand that this particular shape of gold is in the shape of a necklace.
But then, could you just say that you see the colors first, then you see gold, then you see the necklace, then you see what kind, like gold would be under colors?
Yeah, I think it can proceed in that order because I think color is more broad a thing than gold, right? It's more of a general, color is more of a general concept than the concept of gold. Yeah, it's whatever has more the terms extension. So you're right, because there's more brown things, you would understand what it is to be brown before you distinguish different brown things as being a dog versus a cat. Because there's more gold jewelry than there are necklaces, in the process of learning induction, you first understand what gold is and what jewelry is, and then this is a necklace as opposed to like a ring or a bracelet.
Does that mean that particular comes first?
No.
No, because the color brown, that's a generalization because there are many things brown, you don't know the specific shape of brown things.
But if you see, so you're saying that when you see a dog, you first see brown, then you say what kind of brown thing is a dog?
In the order of learning. Okay, so if someone has never seen a dog before, all right, we're talking like developing infants, right? Like in their process, they're gonna figure out, I mean, the first thing that they might distinguish could probably be living versus not living. This thing moves, that thing doesn't. Before they make a distinction of, okay, well, this is a pet dog and that thing was a squirrel. They're two different things. One I can go near, the other would be a bad idea to go near. After they figure out after a lot of trial and error.
But they don't need to know that it's an animal to know that it's brown.
Yes, that's correct. Because brown would also have more extension than animal.
So then why wouldn't, when I said the necklace, first I see, oh, okay. So okay, all right, now I got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool. There's a really funny line from Aristotle that philosophers have puzzled over. I want to read it with you guys. It's in the packet. As St. Thomas quotes it, it's on page 118. And so this is how Aristotle, when he's looking at human nature and talking about, you look to children really when you're looking at the learning process because they're learning everything. And he says this, it's in the middle of the second paragraph, I guess, on page 118. Children at first call all men fathers, and later on distinguish each one from the others. All right, so at first children are like, they interact with their dad and they learn the name for him as Dada. And then all other men then they associate as Dada, okay? And then Aristotle says, then they slowly learn to distinguish between different men. The one thing that's funny about that is kids don't actually call other people Dada. I haven't actually ever seen that. I had a philosophy professor who really puzzled over that line in the physics. Until one day, 4-year-old boy ran up to him, looked up at him and said, "Daddy?" and then ran away. And then he was just left there wondering about Aristotle's physics. Like, maybe this is what he was talking about. So yeah, general, like you're gonna learn what an animal is before you learn what a horse is, as opposed to a hippopotamus, a camel, and all those other kind of distinctions that get made. A way to illustrate this is the Porphyrian tree. And it's a way that like they've kind of broken down the general concepts into the more particulars. Yes?
Can I bring this back to you?
All right, so the most general concept, the most abstract thing is existence, being. And so the first thing to be grasped is existence. Okay? That what everything has in common is that things are. It's kind of like a first level realization. And then from that, you can kind of break them down into things exist. They will then be either, I might be skipping a couple steps, but living versus non-living. Living and non-living things. Okay, and then from the living and non-living things, you can make a further distinction. Okay, is this thing going to be a vegetable, or is it going to be an animal? All right, after you make that distinction between things that are living and non-living, and animal versus vegetable, it's like, okay, is this thing going to be a brute, or is this thing going to be rational? Okay, and I think this process helps to explain why little kids get attached to animals. And it may not just be Walt Disney's fault. And the personification, anthropomorphization of animals, right? Because it's like, it takes a process to make these distinctions of like, yeah, there's animals, I understand what animal is, but to fully understand the difference between a rational animal, which would be man, and then a brute, like a chicken, that gets slaughtered every day to feed global populations, right? These are two different things. And you would want to learn to then start getting less attached to the chickens, but then some people have a harder time getting detached from their dogs and whatnot. I'm saying there's a proper rule, I guess, for companionship with animals, but little kids have a harder time with it. Yes, Ella?
So are you saying that a baby, when it sees a mother, it thinks rational animal living being?
No.
But if it has to have the general first, like, how does it know it's its mother then?
I think the first thing that's comprehended is existence. Okay? That's the first thing that it's aware of.
So when a baby's born, it doesn't think, I exist. Where am I in the world? Am I living? Like, it just,
Right.
like, not even a dog thinks of its own existence.
Yeah, dogs definitely don't do that.
But a dog can know that's my master, that's my owner,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a squirrel. Like, but it doesn't know its own existence.
Right. Well, okay. All right, so let's try to make some distinctions here. We're talking about the development of intellectual knowledge. So it's implied that this is the development of reason and rationality. So have you ever heard of the term age of reason? It's usually, we say, like, kids don't receive first communion until they're of the age of reason. What we mean is they're at a point where their development is getting to the point where they're making these distinctions. Okay. As far as a baby recognizing its mother, if you remember the interior sense powers, so we're not dealing with reason or the intellect with this. The interior sense powers, one of them is the cogitative sense, which in man has a variety of functions, but for animals, we would also call it instinct. Okay, and so children have a natural instinct built in to go to their mother and recognize their mother on an individual basis, okay? But as they're accumulating all this sense data, right? And it's a long process of time. Intellectually, this is what the order is of awareness, of making distinctions. You know, there's individual knowledge that they have.
How can they have individual knowledge if they don't have the general knowledge first?
Because you yourself said a dog will know its master, but then not contemplate the existence of the human race.
Right, but I thought you said you need to have the general
Yeah. And you just asked me how you know.
the baby
So you
has
asked about
the specific-
individual knowledge.
The baby has the specific mother before it has the general existence.
Okay. Particular and individual are not the same thing. We're talking about two different things here.
Okay.
So what is a more particular or specific idea? Lion or animals?
Or more specific to be lion.
That's correct, okay. And so in the process of abstraction, animal is grasped prior to the concept of lion. But in order to come to any kind of universal knowledge, you do always have to start with the individual basis.
So you're saying animals grasp before lion.
Intellectually, conceptually, on an immaterial level in the process of abstraction. And that happens by experiencing individual lions, by experiencing individual elephants, by experiencing individual pictures on a book or what have you.
So the broader animal is grasped before the more specific lion. But I just keep thinking if a baby sees its mother, it doesn't first know the idea of parents.
Right.
It just knows mother, which is more specific.
It doesn't even know mother,
Or like
right? It's not, you can't say it knows mother intellectually.
no, but it knows the specific mother. Like
Sure,
I mean,
specific. The individual.
but the broader would be parents.
The broader term is parents versus mother.
Or like all parents in general, like just like animals then lions, all family and then just the mother.
Hang on. I'm gonna pause this. We'll continue it afterwards.
I can just read over my notes again and then
Yeah, I think